Hello everyone, welcome back to Coding with Mock, and in this video we'll be doing a quick walkthrough of installing Git on your Windows system. Now, before you can install Git, you'll have to download Git from the official website. Now, I'll have a link in the description below to the official website, but for people that don't read comments or the description, the official website is git-scm.com, and you should be presented with a download button here on the bottom right side. Just download the binary for your Windows system and you should be golden. I have already downloaded my executable or my install file, so I won't be downloading it. You should be able to download files from the internet. Now we'll do a quick walkthrough of the installer. Just open up the installer. That should present you with this little window here. It's just a license agreement, plain and simple. If you want, you can read it. I generally, especially GNU licenses, I'm familiar with those, so I don't. In the next On the next screen, you will be presented with some quality of life features where you can add your Git bash to the desktop. You can integrate with your Windows Explorer. Usually, default settings here are fine. Use common sense on this screen. Okay, on the next screen, this is the one that you will want to pay attention to. Most of you will not be familiar with the Vim editor. This is the default editor of Git. If you're a Linux user or used to be a Linux user or are dual booting, you might be familiar with VI. This is a very powerful but really hard to use editor. And I'm not going to create a tutorial about VI. There's a lot of tutorials about it. I've even seen YouTube channels devoted to using VI. It's a really rich and powerful editor, but can be really hard to use. So what I would suggest for most of you is that you have one of the other editors installed. They're all listed here. So you have Notepad++, you have Visual Studio Code, Sublime, Visual Studio Code Insiders, which I'm not really familiar with, Atom, VS Codium, and you can select your own editor. I would suggest for most of you, if you're not familiar with any of the other, just install Notepad++. There is a download link here, and use that as your default editor. Okay, Notepad++ is just Notepad on steroids. You have to have it installed because you can see when I select Notepad++, my next button is grayed out because I don't have Notepad++ installed. Okay. Now for the usage of Git, there will be little to none difference between using Notepad++ and VI. That will just be, the only difference will be in the way we enter or input our comments or the information that the extra information that we want to give to Git when we are committing our code into the system. I will be using VI, and during the tutorials, I'll explain to you how to do it in Notepad++. It's not that hard. Okay, moving on to the next screen. Here, just leave this as default. It's the recommended option using Git from the command line and from third-party software. This way, it will integrate nicely with your IDEs, be it Eclipse or IntelliJ. You should be fine with this option. Also, the HTTPS transfer protocol options, just leave as is. You should be fine here. Also, the checkout Windows style, commit Unix style, also leave it at the default. This is fine. This will work if you're even if you're working in a hybrid environment. And with that, I mean if you are working on a Windows system, your colleague is working on a Mac system, and you have another colleague working on a Linux system, this will work and will be compatible across everybody's computers. So you should be fine there. This one, just leave as is. Then this one as well, once you get a little bit more advanced in using Git, you could reconsider using the default rebase or the fast forward only. We'll be explaining those concepts later on in the tutorial. But for now, just keep it on the default. You should be golden here. Now this screen, the extra options screen, this is one where I would like you to make a little change. By default, normally the Git credential manager is ticked on. So normally this should be on. I recommend disabling it if you're not a C# developer. Okay. For C#, this is a really, or for C# developers, this is a really handy feature because it will help with the integration of Git with Visual Studio Team services or Team Foundation services, which is the Microsoft equivalent of a GitHub remote repository. But for most developers, I would suggest avoiding the hassle or the extra steps that you would need to take with the Git credential manager. Just so switch this off or make sure it's off. If I'm not mistaken, by default this is switched on, so make sure it's ticked off. Okay. Then next, and install. Just wait for the installation to finish. Okay, now once your installation is finished, you can read the release notes if you really want to. I'm not going to, and this might be a bug in the installer because this is the last screen. You can launch the Git bash, but I will be using Git on the command line. Git bash is a little bit different because it simulates a Linux environment. This is really handy for people like me, for instance, who usually work on a Linux system, but for reasons have to work on a Windows system. For those people, that Git bash is really handy, but for most of you, I would recommend just staying on the Windows command line. Okay, then click next or finish if they fixed the bug, and that should exit the installer. Now, just to make sure that everything went fine, open up a command line. So I'm going to open a command line. Come on, there we go. Thank you. I have a command line, and just to check that Git has been installed correctly, I'm just gonna type in Git, and you should get an input like mine here. Okay, you should see usage Git, and then some general options, which we will be looking into in the next tutorials. Okay, now just going to show you what happens if you didn't install correctly. I'm going to purposely mistype the command, but you should get an error message saying Git is not recognized as an internal or external command. That is, if you haven't installed Git properly, then you might have to go and Google and check what went wrong. Now, one of the most common problems that you might run into is that you already had a command line open while you were installing Git. Okay, and now to fix your problem, just close your command prompt, open up a new one, and retry the Git command. It should work, but it should work then. It has to do with Windows and the command line not reloading or requerying the system properties or system variables while your command line is open. So if you already had one open, just close it, open up a new command prompt, and normally you should have Git functionality by then. Okay, good. Now, everything should be installed fine, and you are ready to go on to the Git tutorials.